Flight 2457 was ready for takeoff from Chicago, bound for New York. The passengers were excited, expecting a smooth, uneventful flight. Little did they know, this day would turn into something they'd never forget. Among the passengers was Captain Naomi Daniels, a skilled African-American pilot. Naomi had spent years climbing the ranks in the aviation world and was proud of her achievements. She was a role model, working for Scary Airlines, known for its exceptional service and safety record. But on this particular flight, Naomi wasn't in the cockpit. She was a passenger, heading to New York to visit family. She had booked a first-class seat, a luxury she'd earned after countless hours of flying. But when Naomi handed her ticket to the gate agent, a young woman named Becky Harris, things took an unexpected turn. Sorry, ma'am," Becky said, glancing at the ticket and then at Naomi. "Your seat is in economy. There's been a mix-up." Naomi blinked, confused. "I booked first class." Becky didn't seem to care, her eyes darting nervously as she looked for support from other staff members. Something about the whole exchange felt off to Naomi. This wasn't just about a mistake with a ticket. She could sense it. Becky, flustered, walked away to speak with her supervisor, Paul Harris. When Paul arrived, he barely acknowledged Naomi as he looked over her ticket. "First class?" "All full," he muttered. "You'll need to sit in economy." Naomi tried to keep her cool. She wasn't one to stir up trouble, but she couldn't ignore the feeling that this was more than just a mix-up. "All right," she said softly, taking the boarding pass. "I'll go to my seat." As Naomi made her way through the cabin, she could feel the eyes of the other passengers on her. Whispers followed her every step. None of them knew she was a seasoned pilot. They only saw a woman who didn't belong in economy. She found her seat and settled in, headphones on, trying to block out the unsettling tension in the air. The plane took off smoothly, but 2 hours into the flight, disaster struck. The aircraft suddenly lurched, throwing passengers into their armrests. The cabin went silent before chaos erupted. The flight attendants rushed to the front, their faces pale. The captain's voice came through the intercom, shaky and strained. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties," he said, his voice cracking. "Remain calm." But Naomi wasn't calm. The plane rocked again, harder this time. The low mechanical hum from the engines shifted to a disturbing noise. Naomi's heart raced as she looked around. The flight attendants were doing their best to reassure everyone, but their nervous glances told a different story. Something was wrong. Then the captain's voice crackled again, this time filled with urgency. "We're having engine failure. We'll be turning back to Chicago." The plane dipped, and panic spread like wildfire. Naomi could hear the hushed whispers, the rising fear. Up front, Captain Greg Mason and his co-pilot Matt Brown were exchanging frantic words. Naomi could hear snippets of their conversation. "We're not going to make it," Matt muttered. "We need to land, but we can't." The plane dipped again, and Naomi's stomach dropped. The situation was getting critical. Suddenly, the cabin went dark as the lights flickered, adding to the chaos. Naomi knew it was time to act. Without a second thought, she stood up, her calm demeanor standing in stark contrast to the panic around her. She wasn't just a passenger, she was a pilot, and she wasn't about to wait for the situation to spiral out of control. She walked up the aisle, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Reaching the front of the plane, she didn't ask for permission. She simply spoke, her voice steady and confident. "I'm Naomi Daniels, I'm a pilot. Let me help." Captain Mason turned to her, disbelief written all over his face. "What? You're just a passenger." Naomi didn't flinch. "I've been flying for years. Let me take over." There was a tense silence. Mason looked at his co-pilot, who reluctantly nodded. They were running out of options. "All right," Mason muttered, stepping back. "But if anything goes wrong..." Naomi didn't wait for him to finish. She stepped into the cockpit and took control. The plane, which had been spiraling out of control, stuttered to stability as Naomi expertly adjusted the controls. Her mind was sharp, her focus unwavering as she checked the engines and fuel levels. With calm precision, Naomi guided the aircraft back toward Chicago, her hands steady on the controls. The plane slowly began to stabilize, and the passengers in the cabin watched in awe. They were no longer nervous whispers, but a silent, attentive audience to Naomi's skills. The crew, stunned, realized they had underestimated her. Naomi wasn't just a passenger. She was the hero they needed. When they finally landed safely in Chicago, the passengers erupted into applause. Many stood, clapping and cheering, not just for her flying skills, but for her bravery. Naomi's heart swelled with pride as she stepped off the plane. As she passed Captain Mason, their eyes met. No words were needed. He knew. They all knew. Naomi had shown them what she was truly capable of, not just as a pilot, but as a hero. And for the first time, she felt the weight of the earlier disrespect lift off her shoulders. That day, Naomi proved that no one could define her by the seat she sat in. She was the one in control.